Hello and welcome to another episode of the Digi-Tools and the Accrual World podcast. How did I mess up the name of this show after doing it for like 3 years? That's terrible. The person that can't say names, me, is Ryan Pearcy, and I'm joined by the wonderful John Toon, back from his ski trip, the annual Finance Takes the Piste. Have you survived this year, John?
I survived pretty much in one piece, Ryan. I had a minor infraction on the second day where I fell over and hurt my dodgy knee, but a couple of days rest and I was back up and running. So it's all good.
And was there anyone that I guess suffered as bad an injury as you have in previous years?
We had one or two exciting things. One person fell over and snapped a tendon in his shoulder, so that was a little bit painful. But I think a bit of gin and some French painkillers certainly helped to make it all better. Aside from that, yeah, we did all right. We had no après ski debacles. There was nothing. No one lost on the mountains or anything like that. So it was all good. And we had some really good times. A slightly smaller group than previous years, which I think helped. And some interesting conversations. It's actually nice to kind of just spend some social time with people in the industry because I think that really helps to sort of build relationships.
Yeah, cool. And I know you do have those sessions where you talk about the future and the impact and where the profession's going. It'd be really good to kind of get your thoughts on that maybe a bit later on in the show. But as it's just the two of us this time, we should probably kick pretty much straight into app news. But before that, I want to do a quick shout out to our wonderful sponsor of this episode, which is Unleashed, and what they've been doing with the AI in the Access products. And I guess just the amazing ability to suck data out into a central place as well as a single sign-on. So if you've not caught us talking about this, we've done it in prior shows. We dive into the detail on it, and it's really interesting what Unleashed and the Access team are actually building in that kind of small business unit space. But we're not here to talk too much about them today. We've got to dive into app news. You got anything for us, John?
I do, as it happens, and you teed me up quite neatly there with that link from Unleashed into Access, because I have some news from Fathom, who are also part of the Access group, and they have finished off an integration with FreeAgent. I think we kind of knew that they were working on this. We've known about this for a little while, but it's now official. I think this is great news for both products. I think it's fair to say we're both big fans of both these products, and obviously having that ability now to pull in more data from more GL systems into Fathom makes that product even more powerful. And for me, at least, probably one of the better reporting products out on the market in terms of not just the ability to do management accounts, but I really like some of the KPI tools and some of the, sort of like almost like mini forecasting tools that they have in there in terms of like scenario planning and stuff. So that's now live. If you're a FreeAgent user or a Fathom user, you can now connect the two together, pull the data in, do all the good stuff that you'd be familiar with if you've already used Fathom in the past with, say, QuickBooks or Xero. And obviously, this is a bit of an add-on for FreeAgent as well, whose reporting is pretty good. Obviously can now be embellished with some of the more colourful, exciting stuff that Fathom bring to the party.
Yeah, definitely. And this, I think, it builds on what FreeAgent were doing through 2025, just selecting those best-of-breed partnerships that they can at this kind of smaller level, right? They're being very selective.
Absolutely.
Rather than open their API into everyone coming in and then maybe having to do what Xero have done, which is then start to close that down over time. They're being very selective, work out the right partners, and then the ones that enhance their product, take it to another level that is harder to do directly inside the system.
Agreed.
Cool. Well, look, I've got something that is close to heart, really. I've got something from Tom Herbert at Accounting Web. He has done an article on the fact that payroll software has gaps in reporting maternity pension contribution. Now, the reason this is close to heart is that we identified this in my family and then reported this back to an accounting firm and got that rectified, not only for my wife, but then for other people in that firm. But it also happened in the firm I was at, in that we've got this issue where payroll software typically is automatically calculating pension contribution based on your earnings. Now, when you go on maternity leave, your earnings automatically drop, right? Because you're going down to statutory maternity pay, but your pension contributions shouldn't. They should be based on what you are, well, I guess should be paid as a gross pay level, because that's what you're contracted on. But no payroll software out there seems to have automatically built it into the system to flag this. And as a payroll professional nowadays, you're doing so many payrolls like all the time and trying to think of every specific thing you need to know. This gets missed quite frequently. I'm not saying everyone misses it. There are those that are manually adjusting this, and you have to manually adjust it because the system isn't doing that automatically. But it's frequent, it's prolific out there. So if you are an accounting firm out there that runs payrolls, please talk to your payroll team, make sure that they are ensuring the pension contributions for those on maternity are what they were before they went into maternity leave. and also feed this back to your payroll provider. Now, it's not a just single provider we're singling out here. I think even in the article, they flagged that BrightPay, Deal, Employment Hero, Intuit, Rippling, Sage, and Xero don't have this. They do not keep the maternity pension contributions at the level they should be. So to all payroll providers, payroll systems, this is something you need to build in. This is fundamental. It is a problem like throughout. The amount of errors that are going to be out there for understating pension contributions for those on maternity pay is going to be prolific. Please address it in your system. It can't be that complex. Just look at what the gross pay should be before and then apply it going forward. I say that, not fully understand the complexities of the software, but it is a problem, right? It's a regulatory problem. Oh God, I can't talk today, but yeah, please address it.
Well, so I'm clearly so out of touch, right, and that I didn't even realize this was an issue, to be perfectly honest. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think there will be many people in accounting practices and potentially also in payroll bureaus who are unaware of this issue. And I guess this is one of the demonstrations of like why it helps to not just rely on the software when you're doing a lot of the work that we do in our roles, but also to actually employ a professional who understands some of the nuances and some of the challenges, and also will then hopefully have spotted some of these things. I do have a question which I guess neither of us would maybe be able to answer, but I guess for those people who say salary sacrifice their pension contributions, what kind of complexity does that add when you go on maternity leave or paternity leave, potentially, like you say, particularly when you drop down to the statutory rates? Because I know if you're doing salary sacrifice and you're close to minimum wage, you obviously can't drop your salary below minimum wage through salary sacrifice. And I don't know, I honestly don't know if there's a similar kind of restriction on statutory payments as well, and whether or not that just makes this whole problem even more complicated than it potentially could be.
Well, I don't think you can reduce your salary below statutory payments, like for salary sacrifice. And I think you'd take the higher of the two. I don't know though for certain. But from a software perspective, that's easier to do because from a salary sacrifice perspective, the software's already there. It already handles that. It puts what the pensionable pay level is. The problem is as soon as you go to statutory, right, that pensionable pay level just plummets. And the system needs to kind of know that actually, which should be at this level, when we've gone to statutory, it's just the amount that's being paid is lower, but the calculation for anything that's pension is based on the original salary. And I would say that I'm not blaming software providers because so many payroll professionals and accountants out there are also oblivious to it. It got flagged, and then I guess in the firm I was at, and then once it was flagged, it was like, yeah, this doesn't look right. Once it was checked and validated, obviously it took a little while to do that. Oh, yeah, this has been done wrong. And then similarly, it seems to be not just in one firm. This goes beyond and probably throughout the entire sector to some extent. So if there's anything that we have done apart from just tech insights, hopefully we're advising on regulations, right, and compliance. So make sure as a firm you are checking that you're doing this correctly.
It's a brave new world for the podcast. Who'd have thought it? Oh my word. Well, getting back to what we really know and understand, we'll talk a little bit more about technology. Xero have now fully rolled out the Syft capabilities within the core platform. For those that don't know, Xero bought Syft a little while ago and kind of incrementally been sort of bringing more and more of that Syft functionality in there. And you'll have seen that kind of slightly annoying banner that sort of sits on the dashboard that you can't get rid of, and various other things. But it's now fully baked in. So what does that mean? It basically means that now if you can use the analytics and some of the reporting functionality within Xero, that's effectively powered by the Syft technology. And now you'll sort of start to see, again, some additional functionality. Most of this is built around sort of KPI reporting, I would say. It's kind of a mixture of things. So there's some very nice sort of screenshots and stuff that I've seen. I've actually used this a little bit, to be fair, myself. And you can see some good stuff on things like, for example, what does my net profit look like month to month, which obviously is fairly simple, but you can see that both in a graphical form. You can see some trend analysis within that. You can sort of see what the influences are for those as well in terms of what's happening within your business. You get the same on sort of cash reporting. You get the same on some other bits and pieces. And I'm a big fan. We talked about Fathom previously. I'm a big fan of kind of like visual representation of like financial data, because I think when you kind of got it just in number form, as much as I love the numbers because I'm an accountant, I actually think when you're talking to clients, and trying to convey a message, you're having a visual representation of that and trying to sort of understand what the influences are of various things in your business really comes to life when you've got a visual representation. So this I think is very, very neat. I think, am I right in saying this is all just built in? There's no additional cost to this. So it makes the reporting functionality of Xero really enhanced as a consequence. And I think, am I fair to say that probably this is one of Xero's better acquisitions, done a couple of years ago, back in 2024. I think it was $70 million that they paid for it. We've seen acquisitions before and after, which frankly, have not worked out or have really killed the share price. So, this is a good deal, I think, for everyone involved. And, so nice to see that this is live, and it's been live. What we're doing, recording on the 28th. It's been live for 2 weeks, Ryan. There you go.
Well, you say that. Still not sure I've got it in mind yet. I've seen it in clients, but that may just be because I haven't refreshed my browser cookies or something. It always comes down to something like that.
It's because your accounts are boring. That's why they're like, nah,
that's what it
is.
He
doesn't need any graphs on there.
There's nothing to show. But no, I completely agree with you. The visualizations are much improved. It helps power the new dashboard, I think, to some extent in Xero. And the way you can slice data in different ways, you can dive into it in more detail if you so want, but you can obviously look at it at an abridged level. What I did find is the early beta releases of this were a bit overwhelming. There was a bit too much information. And I believe that they've kind of, from feedback, narrowed this down to the critical bits that you need to see. But yeah, great acquisition. Not only did they get a great reporting tool, which they've actually built in quickly on a lot, like compared to what I guess is normally done once you made an acquisition. Like think about HubDoc, for example, and kind of it's still not really fully embedded, in my opinion. You've also got all the data on all of those businesses and across all the accounting firms that were using Syft. So I think it was a great acquisition and really helped them not only from a tech perspective but from a data perspective.
Yeah, agreed. Actually, sorry, I've just read the press release properly, and it's available for those on a Grow subscription and above. And the higher up the plans you get, the more functionality you get. And if you're on the Ultimate plan, you get the ability to actually import external data sets to add even more context to your financial information. So there you go.
This is okay. That I think it's more than anything. That's actually given more value to like the Ultimate plan. We ripped into these plans a while back. We were like, well, what's the differentiator here? You can have some more employees or some more on expenses. But this now, I think from a reporting perspective, actually really adds value. So no, that's great. I definitely have at least the Grow plan though. So I'm going to have a look at my system and work out what's going on. I've got something nowhere near as interesting from Xero, and that is that they have now brought credit notes on par with invoices. Woo! It's in that new look and that new modern way of a new modern UI inside Xero. Now, it's not a huge shift, but it is going to change, I guess, some of the functionality, like where you go to click and interact within the system. Unlike invoices, where it saves as you go along, credit notes, you have to save it down. So it's not going to save as you type in. That could be a positive or negative. I think the lack of consistency is a bit frustrating. I think some people like the fact invoices save automatically and some people don't. I guess it swings and roundabouts to some extent. But the allocation system, so allocating it to an invoice or doing a refund now, there's like a little button rather than where it was located, I think, in the bottom left on the old screen. But they are going to be iterating this over time as well. So you're going to be able to do a quick cash refund. So I think it's a little bit more complex in the new system at the moment, I guess as part of the realignment. You're going to be able to add multiple rows quickly inside the system as well, and the ability to do a little preview if you need to attach something into the system. One bit that I've always found frustrating, I guess, with credit notes is that when you want to do a payment or you want to receipt something, a lot of the time you want to pick up a load of credit notes and invoices and then do a receipt allocation. I don't think that's still there yet, so that'd be really good. Once again, that's more bank functionality than UI functionality that's been released. If Xero listing, that's probably more what people want functionality rather than the look or feel of it. Obviously, if you've now changed the system to enable you to do more with it, because we see it as a UI change, but my understanding is actually a complex code background change. That's why it takes a while to do. So hopefully in the new realm, you have more flexibility to do some of this, especially with what I still think is an amazing auto reconcile. Sorry, Patrick, I call it reconcile allocation, auto allocation system inside Xero.
He just needs to get over himself.
It's terminology. I don't care. To me, it reconciles, allocates at the same time as long as your bank feed's good. And I use a modern bank; it's always 100% accurate. If you're getting errors, it's your bank. It's not the system. But yeah, that was a little bit for me. But I do have something a bit more interesting, and that was more of a bit of a teaser. I don't think this was intended. So there was a job advert that came out on LinkedIn about a week ago. And it talks about a super strategic role to a brand new user segment for Xero. And that's covering, I guess, go-to-market sales and cross team like functionality. Now, when there's a job advert for something like this, and this is for a VP or GM, so it's a big high-end level. It really is making you think, what are they doing here? Like, what is this new user segment? Are they finally listening to us and saying, you will need a bigger product for those bigger businesses, because that would be amazing? Or maybe just this is hope more than fact here. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be like potentially huge. They talk about it having the potential to grow into hundreds of millions of dollars in business. So this is not a small thing. This is a big thing that they're looking to build. Obviously, it's not talked about in too much detail, but yeah, I think this is a little teaser maybe of what's to come, or at least what they're thinking of for future iterations of Xero.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a logical step, right? I mean, we've seen this with Intuit. They've added on additional capability, volume capability, and stuff in terms of transactions. And Xero, we know that Xero are feeling the heat from not just Intuit, but the resurgence of FreeAgent here in the UK. An element of resurgence from Sage as well, nibbling away. Plus, of course, we have these kind of like mid-layer ERPs that sit above Xero. I'm talked, I don't know, for the last 4 years about how the kind of natural step out of a product like Xero or Intuit is into one of those spaces. And so this has got to be a logical step for them to kind of protect the sort of space in the marketplace, but also to expand that out. And to be fair, despite all of the changes that Xero have made around the API and stuff, they still have the best ecosystem, of all of the accounting ERP type products out there, pretty much. And so this would make sense for them to kind of maximize the opportunity if they can scale this out. I do think if this is kind of where all this conjecture leads to, they are going to have to really like knuckle down on some of the functionality they have. There is definitely some big missing gaps for larger organizations as a consequence of the API changes that they've shut down. You kind of look at things like what Mayday were doing, for example, what maybe people like Translucents were trying to achieve as well. Plus, of course, some of the really simple stuff that Dexter have also bolted on. There are elements of things there that really appeal to larger, more complex organizations, and Xero are going to have to do something about that, fix those gaps. And if we're perfectly honest, product from Xero has not been developing at the kind of pace or level that we would expect. They've not even really been nibbling away at some of the really basic stuff that some users have been asking for maybe 5 or 10 years. And that's a real challenge. They're going to have to throw some money at this. But if they pull it off and they're successful, then you could see that this is going to be a good opportunity for them to kind of maintain customers that might churn at the top end, but also maybe acquire some customers that maybe they wouldn't normally appeal to.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And look, this is speculation. The part of the job advert is asking for experience in building SaaS products for SMBs or enterprise. And what could turn out is this is just a new expense add-on. Who knows? But we're hopeful to some extent, because this is something that I've been craving for such a long time. The limits cause frustrations for many businesses that love Xero and want to kind of grow with it. And finding a way to enable that would be amazing. I don't think we're this lucky, John. I'm sure it's going to be something far less interesting, but I can hope, right?
I mean, when have we ever been let down by our own conjecture, Brian? Come on, let's be honest.
Never. We're always 100% accurate.
We're like the accounting equivalent of Mystic Meg.
Yeah. It's because I'm always fondling my ball.
I've got a cheeky little bit to jump in, and it's a little bit breaking because it was embargoed. So do you mind if I jump on and just tell you about it?
No, I think it's a pleasure to have you here, Indy. I want to hear about it.
Well, we saw lately, didn't we? We saw some changes being made by Sage in terms of its embedded software services. And this time they are doing the same, embedding their technology into HSBC. So HSBC's UK's My Business Finances will allow customers to manage accounting and submit tax returns directly from their HSBC UK business banking account, which is all in a bid to help support and get sole traders and businesses ready for making tax digital. So it is quite a cool little play for Sage, and we've seen a lot of changes that they've made over the course of the last year, but this seems like a more strategic shift long term to having a focus on the embedded side of what it can do in partnership or in conjunction with other types of entities in the space who probably have a much bigger reach and have a broader presence to a lot of the sole traders or smaller businesses. So what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, so the end of last year, or back end of last year, they partnered with Monzo about the filing of MTD. And now I guess they've upgraded into HSBC, bigger presence. But this embedded technology seems to be a new forefront for them. I thought it might be a one-off at the back end of last year, but like white labeling their system and powering others seems to be now a new strategy for Sage. And I think that having the ability for banks to try and keep their clients within their platform, where it was starting to go the other way for quite a long time. Yeah, maybe this is, because we've had it for quite a long time, right? Where accounting systems would bring the bank feeds in and therefore clients didn't really need to go onto the banks anymore. Well, now it's flipped on its head. Those account systems are powering the banks to keep those clients in their systems. Interesting take on it. I'm not certain how well it will be delivered, how well it will come across, but I think they can do quite a bit from inside HSBC systems, what they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen other people take a different approach to this. So RBS snapped up FreeAgent, and that was their way of making sure that they had a good response to handling tax agendas, or at least like being able to have a seamless user experience. So it's very intriguing that Sage has announced Monzo not too long ago with the same sort of agenda. Now we've got a HSBC, maybe a few more to come as well. And it also shows that this won't have been an overnight thing. So I think back a few years ago, we started hearing that Sage was making much more inroads and deeper connections into a lot of the different UK banks. So I think this is just a long time coming, but the MTD has been a vehicle for having something really tangible that someone can execute upon, has a deadline to it. And it really shows that there's like a start to a different type of relationship that Sage can have with some of the major UK banks.
Yeah, definitely. And Sage have not put all their eggs in one basket, but really gone after making tax digital for income tax. That has been their big banner, their differentiator against some of the others in this space. And this just helps cement that, because that's exactly what this partnership with HSBC is all about. It's about those small customers that don't have a partnership, don't have an accountant, aren't ready for making tax digital, but they do have a business bank account. So they will now be able to be compliant.
Do you think some of the others are missing the boat a little bit here? Because it will have taken a long time for HSBC to get something up to ramp and up to par. And now we've got, Sage's got a good couple of use cases in their bank. So there's probably, you can see that they're going to have much more traction with maybe some of the other old school bigger banks too. I don't imagine that this would be some ground that QuickBooks or Xero could catch up on. And I wouldn't see that some of the other products that are out there would even attempt to go the same way. Sage, being the beast that it is, at least has figured out a clever way to not only embed itself to have something that's seamless end-to-end enough within the banking experience, and on top of that, taking care of the tricky parts, which is often the integration, the data security, the interfacing between these two different systems, and still provide something quite seamless. I don't think you can catch up with that. I think this is a stellar announcement, and congrats to them.
Yeah. And if I was the others, I wouldn't even try to catch up. I mean, Xero and QuickBooks are very much about their own brand. They will more embed, as I guess we've seen some announcements regarding QuickBooks, embed technology in from their end towards the banking sector, more finance. Yeah, I would say Sage's experience in the UK market, its relationships it's built out of many years, and the fact that, it's no secret, they struggled when cloud first came over and they were behind the curve. They're finding new, unique ways to actually make a difference, make an impression. They're doing that with Sage Intacct on a larger scale. Struggling on the smaller end, making tax digital for income tax is very much a play they've gone after. And with it, now embedded technology into others. And I think it's a great avenue for them. And I would hope and expect to see more banks announce similar things.
Watch this space.
Oh, I've got an update that we missed, to be fair, from a few weeks ago. Scoro have launched an MTP server, which is super exciting. This has been in beta testing for a wee while, but it's now fully available for everyone. And maybe if we just sort of strip this back very quickly, MCP was something that I thought was going to be the acronym of sort of 2025 that we'd all be talking about. And as it happens, it kind of got drowned out by a few other things. But that essentially, MCP servers are, I guess, really like the APIs of the large language model world. This is basically allowing you to connect ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, whatever your kind of large language model of choice is, to a piece of software, an additional piece of software, using an MCP server, so that you can then do things with that software through natural language. So that could be something like creating a new customer, it could be creating an order, it could be doing a whole bunch of things. And obviously it depends on what you connect to. And actually, just before we were recording, right now we're sort of briefly talking about this in terms of obviously firms and businesses are trying to make a decision about, do we choose Copilot, for example, and have that all sitting in our Microsoft technology stack and have that additional layer of security that we have with that? Or do we kind of go down the other route of maybe going down ChatGPT and having to like manage some of the complexities around data and control and other things? But this is here, and so effectively, Scoro's MCP server actually is very, very comprehensive. I had a quick look at the video and the demonstrations that go with it, and you can do a whole bunch of things with this. You can quite literally do about sort of 30 or 40 different tasks through the MCP server. So there's, and as anyone that uses Scoro will know that it's got a huge whole bunch of functionality in here. But what I really like about the opportunity with MCPs is that, if I'm connected to Scoro, maybe I'm connected to Xero in the back end, I could be connected to Zapier, I could be connected to my Outlook and my emails. I can then draw up a whole bunch of context and do things and automate things through this natural language things. And this is one of the things that really, really appeals to me, because it allows you to then kind of orchestrate a whole bunch of different workflows and stuff from within that. And this is even before you start to look at, can you build like an agent over the top or do something a little bit different. So this is now here. Scoro do have some example use cases, which I think is always really helpful. So you can reschedule meetings. So within Scoro itself, there is kind of like a diary functionality, and that will link into Gmail and Outlook and things. You can add on meeting times. You can check on the project progress of either a single project or multiple projects all at once. You can get it to draft an email and send that out to a client to sort of highlight whether or not you're in front or behind your schedule. You can get it to pull data from a call and add that into a task in Scoro as well. So, which is kind of like then leaching into some of the other stuff that we've seen in our marketplace around meeting recordings and how to kind of get actions and tasks from that. So again, more and more challenge we're starting to see as a consequence of this. You can pull data from, say, HubSpot and push that into Scoro and create a quote in there automatically. So again, this is kind of taking you away from maybe using a product like Zapier to kind of glue these things together, but actually doing this in natural language. And you can also just pull a whole bunch of stuff from other data sources, maybe like say Gmail or Slack or Jira or whatever, to then highlight where things are at and get some real context over what's happening. So I mean, I'm a huge fan of MCP. I think there's a huge bunch of capability that you get from this, and it's really a matter of like trying to explore what softwares are adding to this in terms of what endpoints and stuff you can see, and how this is standardized. And I do think as a consequence of this, we've kind of struggled with natural language as a way of getting data out of systems, and for some things it's been very gimmicky. I'm not a big fan of, say, Copilot and Outlook, because I just think it's a bit rubbish most of the time. But actually, being able to sort of like say, right, hey, tell me where my 10 projects are in Scoro, and like give me an update on all of these things. And actually, right, if I'm behind on one of these things, can you draft me an email to just update the client and just sort of say, oh, it's really sorry, we're behind on this. I think that's really cool, because from a user perspective, you'd be hopping in and out of lots and lots of products. And we've talked again over the last few years about how firms and businesses have been trying to rationalize their products because they're getting a little bit of app fatigue and don't like to hop between multiple sources of information. Well, this is a great way of like starting to aggregate and combine that data in a way that's interrogable, it's accessible, it's kind of easily summarized and things. And so maybe this will help to disperse some of that app fatigue that we've been experiencing.
Yeah, and I'm excited about this because I'm, as of recording, rolling out both Scoro and HubSpot. And although there is a basic integration there that exists, and you can expand it through the likes of Zapier, what you've just described sounds amazing. So yeah, I need to tap into this once we've kind of done the initial rollout. So no, it's very powerful. And I know they've built out Eli, which is their kind of AI agent inside Scoro already, which is using data extraction and linking and automated interaction to some extent. So yeah, they've really led into the AI side, but in a very strategic way rather than it just being a token. Oh, we've got some AI chat thing in the background. Cool. All right. Well, I am picking up a system I think we talked about in the last podcast, which is not one that normally comes up. It's Acumatica. So quite a large scale ERP system. And as we, I guess, mostly work with or talk about kind of small business systems, it's not one that normally comes to the fore. But they've recently had their annual conference, of which there were 3,000-ish attendees. And one of the big, I guess, announcements there was they're leaning very heavily into AI. Who would expect it? But they're doing it in 3 angles. So they're essentially, and I guess we're seeing more and more of this, right? Is that when a software vendor talks about AI now, is it doing workflow? Is it doing insights? Is it kind of just an interactive tool? Well, that's essentially kind of how they're defining it as well. They've got AI automation, which is their intelligent workflows. That's focusing on automating a lot of complex workflows that are directly in their system. And considering it is a big ERP, I'd expect that to be quite prevalent in Acumatica. It's enabling code-free customization. So if you need to edit things, you can do that via, I guess, natural language, but through the workflows you've got inside the system. Integrated external AI services, as I guess you were alluding to, John, that's probably talking about MCP service to some extent. And then how you're going to protect sensitive information automatically by, I guess, just highlighting, for example, we've got this client needs to be locked down from these people, bringing in, I guess, those security permissions through AI interaction. They've then got AI Advisor. So this, as you'd expect, is all about dynamic data processing and extraction. It also does anomaly detection. And this is something I think so many of these finance systems should be doing. I really can't speak today, can I?
Come on, roll Sean Connery.
So I know that this is something that I appreciate we're looking at. Where I feel that we're going to start going towards is real-time audit, not led from audit firms, but led by systems that can automatically highlight anything that is out of the ordinary, put that into a tracking system to then report on at any point in the year. So if you are an auditor, you'll just be able to dive into the system and look at, well, what are the high risk areas? What do I need to focus on? And that would, as we should always do as auditors, base or lead our audit onto a risk focused approach rather than just a transaction testing approach. And then I guess as we're also seeing a lot, it's about AI demand forecasting. So what's happening? What do we think is going to happen in the future based on how we have operated in the past? And then finally, as every system seems to be doing, an AI assistant. Woo! Both chat and voice interface. Now, voice, I think, is more critical. I think we went through a period where there were these kind of voice bots like we'd talk to, and it didn't really work. I think they're going to resurface as we move forward because more and more people are working at home. So data sensitivity is not as critical, and the ability to just talk quickly at something whilst doing something else would be able to, I guess, work in multiple different ways. Maybe this is going beyond Minority Report where we've got flashy gloves, we're moving things around. Now we're just going to talk our systems to get all the information. And then, visual presentations of charts, etc. And it says telemetry and feedback of continuous service improvement. The telemetry bit's thrown me slightly, but the rest of it sounds really impressive.
Sounds like you're flying a plane, doesn't it? The telemetry is like
it does.
Okay,
yeah,
interesting.
I'm really sure that bit's going to come through, but yeah, I think we'll try and flag back on this once they start releasing a lot of this functionality.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit with you on the voice thing, Ryan. I mean, as someone who hates a WhatsApp voice note because it's just so bloody irritating because I have to listen to it and then figure out how I want to respond to it, rather than just having a written message that I can just pick up and read at any point in time. I still struggle a little bit with voice interaction with chatbots, large language models. Having said that, I mean, I do use AI assistants occasionally, but it's always very short, my interaction. I'm not a big one of sort of chatting with these things, and having a northern accent doesn't help because they never get the words right in the first place. So that's also that's my own personal challenge to overcome. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe one day we'll all be interacting with their account software via voice, and they won't ever be touching a
Yeah.
keyboard and mouse.
I think it comes down to intelligence around sensitivity and situation. So
Agreed.
it's just the same thing with voice notes, right? Is that I have no idea what's in this voice note, and I am now surrounded by family. Do I want to push play? I don't know, and that's the bit, right? If it's a text, you can look at it, and only you are ingesting that information. But when it's voice, everyone around you is going to hear it to some extent, and that I think causes some challenges. And that's where I think AI can come into its own here, because it can give some context of where you are. Because let's be honest, our phones are always listening all of the time. It still freaks me out that they seem to know exactly what's going on and then give me adverts based on that. So, yeah, I think this is. I think it will come back to the fore over the coming years.
Yeah, I agreed. And I mean, just because we're miserable old gits and don't like to talk to our software doesn't mean that other people don't want to, right? So that's one thing we
True.
should bear in mind. We're like the Bert and Ernie of the LLM world, aren't we?
I was thinking that we are the Bert and Ernie. Not sure which one. I think you're definitely Bert, because didn't he have the kind of black tufty bit of hair?
I mean, it's going that way at the moment, isn't it? I mean, look at this.
Yes.
Right, one last little bit of news, and then we can end this nonsense. So I picked up something from Insightful Accountant, and you'll never guess, Ryan, but this is also about how accounting firms can use AI agents to have better advisory conversations. So this came from a product in our ecosystem, but I guess more aligned probably with the US and America, and it's sort of it's being built out by Accountero, which is like I said, an advisory-based app sort of for drilling into the data, predominantly in your QuickBooks. I think they do have a Xero integration as well, but obviously being the US product, your QuickBooks is where they spend most of their time. And one of the things that they have been trying to demonstrate with this product is how do you stop like the interruptions and the challenges that we get from like just thinking, which I think is a really interesting way of using AI, because quite often the challenges we've seen and some of the news that we've seen from like the utilization of AI is it actually affects the way that we think as human beings, and it diminishes our capability to kind of have constructive thought processes and create the necessary challenge and stuff. And this is really about how do we almost like block time in our diary to sort of think properly about a problem and a challenge without the constant interruptions of emails, client queries, phone calls, whatever it is, and just really get into the weeds of something. So I thought that was quite an interesting thing. The basic point of this is that they have two AI agents that Accountero have built out. One is called Amy, one is called Paige, and they have specific roles. So Amy is a conversational AI agent, basically trained on your technology stack. I don't know how it draws all of that up, and obviously if you're a firm that has on-prem solutions, which some larger firms will definitely still have, the question mark over whether or not it draws up that data, it's not covered in here, so we don't really know. But what it allows you to do is you switch Amy on, and instead of sitting in your inbox and getting bombarded with emails all the time, Amy will just start to analyze that and pull real-time data from the context of what's going on in your inbox with the context of what it can see in other products like Intuit, for example, and then give you answers and support and responses to this. This, I don't think, is particularly new. Seeing this in a few other products that are both here in the UK market and European markets, but also in the US. So there's a fair amount of competition in this, and this is something that a lot of people are trying to work at. The other product which I mentioned, which is Paige, a product that's designed specifically for accountants and not for clients, and this is being branded as an analytical tool, which effectively will help you to kind of like review and cleanse your QuickBooks or your accounting ledger data. And I guess this is kind of like the AI equivalent of your I don't know, Dex Precision, maybe, let's say, for example, or Expert, where it's going in, it's looking at your data, it's trying to find out, are there inconsistencies in the data, are there maybe like GST, VAT problems, for example, where that's relevant. And then it will basically create a report back to you and sort of say, hey, John, hey, Ryan, these are the things that I found. You might want to drill into this and sort of see if this needs to be fixed. I think it's an interesting take on tools that are already out there in the wild. I guess the question mark is, is this really adding significant value? Is it time saving over what's already out there? Or is this just a different way of just a different way of creating that kind of report? And I guess if it's just a different way of creating the report, you're probably just going to stick with the tools that you've got unless there's a way of kind of going in and correcting some of these problems through the language model itself, and not having to intervene yourself manually, because I think that's where you could find the real time saving.
I mean, from the way you summarized those two products, I'm not sure how it's preventing distraction. I was really, really interested, especially if it could prevent distraction from children. Then I was like, I'm in. It just doesn't matter. I'm just giving you my money. Doesn't matter how
Do you
much it
not
is.
put them in a cage? That's what most people do, right?
I've tried that. The social services came around and they're now watching me. But but no, it's I think it's that change of working from home, right? Within the time frame the kids are not at school, then there's noise going on in the background that always means you can't 100% focus. But yeah,
I agree.
emails,
Yeah.
Slack, there's constant pings nowadays that distract you from your train of thought, and trying to get that shut down in an effective way whilst you're still being responsive promptly is always a challenge.
And I think, like you say, it's not just the sort of technology distractions, it's all the other physical distractions around you. Whether you're working from home or in the office, how an AI is going to stop someone walking up to your desk and asking you a question, or how AI is going to stop your daughter or son coming up to you and saying, "Oh, when's lunchtime? Can you feed me?" or whatever it might be. It's just not going to work, right?
Yeah, and there's a balance because there's a reason we get interrupted. We could shut the door if you go back to the old style, but then there was a thing where you need an open door policy because the people you're supporting, your junior team, need guidance, or they get stuck and they sit there and waste time. So there's always a balance that you need to draw here. And I think that sometimes there's too much of a focus in that we're always getting distracted. I do like the email thing. I do like what they're trying to do with the email. And as you say, it's not necessarily new, but it can be focused down from the accounting sector, just like Vinyl is focused from the AI note taker for the accounting sector. I think it could be really powerful. I actually have one little bit of news that I want to bring in before the end, and that is that it turns out Airwallex are under investigation. So Australia's financial crimes regulator has launched an investigation into Airwallex over suspected anti-money laundering failures. Now, this is all to do with like weak customer checks or poor monitoring of risky transactions. Airwallex have been growing significantly. I know Indy is always talking about this stuff, and you have to get that balance between getting your security right, but without limiting growth. And I'm guessing that Airwallex have not quite got the balance right here. Now, they've just recently raised $500 million for a valuation of $8 billion US, which is nuts. So they are, a huge company now, and having something like this, disrupts that to some extent. They've been, fully cooperative. They're saying they really want to help in the investigation, as you should do, and make sure that, if there is anything that is uncovered that is weak, that they're going to rectify that as soon as feasible. Out of this, apart from, I guess, this being a challenge for Airwallex and anyone that's using Airwallex, the timing of this for when Dex are about to launch Dex payments powered by Airwallex couldn't possibly be any worse for Dex, could it? Now, I guess their view might be, well, we're doing a lot of it, but Airwallex is the underlying engine for it, and it needs to go through the to some extent the AML processes to make sure it's compliant with them. I think that Dex should be getting in front of this, and maybe they have. I'm not seeing it, but they should be stating that from their perspective, they've got all this covered, they've got all this buttoned down, because I think there's always a concern when accountants look at a product and there's any kind of risk regarding security, regarding AML, because it's something we have to focus on so much as a profession. And I'm sure that Dex are all over it, but I'd like to see something just stating that they are considering this has been announced.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for me, and as you say, Indy's kind of covered this a few times, and we've seen this, with various people in our industry and outside of our industry, where they've fallen foul of money laundering regulations and been deemed not to have done enough. Obviously, this is the early stages of an investigation. We don't know the outcome, so it may well be that Airwallex have done nothing wrong, or they may well have done something wrong, in which case they'll probably end up with a fine and have to move on with it. I mean, it's interesting that this investigation's happened in Australia, because I remember trying to put a client on Airwallex a while back, and I was actually at a group of companies, of which the Australian company was the parent company, and they pushed back really hard on that because of the kind of the connections with like Hong Kong and stuff at the time. And there was a big thing from the Australian government about not dealing with their businesses sort of connected to China. But this is going back a few years ago. So, I'm sure that there's no real significant correlation there. But, this is just sort of the environment we live in at the moment. Hopefully for the investors and for everyone else that's sort of connected to this, this will just sort of eventually come to come to being dealt with, and that'll all be over. But you're right. And Dex, I mean, I don't know. Do Dex need to get in front of this, or do Dex just have to kind of like stay quiet and just kind of, this is a problem with the partner that they've gone to bed with, as it were, and these things happen. Regulatory challenges happen all the time. It happens in our world in accounting, and it's only the really big stuff that becomes public. That doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't necessarily mean that this is bad per se. It just means that we're maintaining quality in our marketplace.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess my viewpoint is that things that aren't addressed, people speculate on. So if you go out and make a comment, at least you're acknowledging it and you're stating what you're doing. If you don't do that, then people wonder what's going on. But I don't think realistically, it's going to have any negative impact whatsoever on how the DEX payment system will work. It's just timing, right? But people at DEX must be like, oh, come on. Why did this have to happen now? It's just how we work, right? And what goes on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that brings app news to a close for this episode. But before we wrap up, I would like to ask you, John, what interesting insights came out of Finance Takes the Piece this year? Because I know you brought some stuff where you've had really great conversations. It's been forward thinking, and a lot of the people that go are kind of pioneers or trendsetters in the accounting profession. So was there anything that kind of came out where you thought is something that will be new that people should really listen to?
I mean, we did have some really interesting conversations. I also found that there was a really diverse set of opinions, which struck me as being quite interesting. I think historically, when I've been on these trips, there's been a general consensus about where we sort of see the future of accounting or bookkeeping and other parts of our world. And I actually think this time around there was a greater level of uncertainty about what the future looks like and where the future lies. So one of the sessions that we talked about was it was all about what's the firm of the future look like. If you kind of had a blank piece of paper today, and you had unfettered access to all of the technology that's out there, how would you create the business of the accounting business of the future, and what would that look like? There was a huge range of diversity. Everything from some people who would say, oh, it's all about the people, which obviously we are a people business, but how do we create a people powered business, but still with a level of focus on compliance, which I found quite challenging, because I think compliance is becoming more and more automated, becoming more and more systemized with technology, and potentially you could have a hands-off compliance practice in the future. There were certain people who were completely on board with like maybe doing more and more offshoring to make that work cheaper and to keep the margins higher. Some people were dead set against that. Others were still challenged about what the technology landscape looks like and whether or not you can truly be a fully cloud practice if you wanted to scale out. So many, I mean, that was the interesting thing, so many diverse opinions, so much stuff. And again, still so many people struggling with the broader AI challenge, in terms of like, what does it tangibly bring to a practice? How do you maximize the benefit of using ChatGPT, for example, and stuff like that? And interestingly, just after I got back, or maybe on a tail end of last week, there was ICAW released a message to sort of say to advisors, look, if you use ChatGPT or a large language model or whatever it is to kind of come up with advice, you are still responsible for that advice. And it's like, well, did we really need that? Do we really, really need as a profession to be reminded that we're responsible for delivering the advice to our clients, no matter what the source? I mean, we used to Google this information previously, or we used to go and look for it in books and then make our own interpretation. And I don't ever remember the ICAW saying, when you read a book, you need to make sure that you don't blame the publisher for the advice that you're giving.
Isn't this similar to the coffee cups that have caution hot written on it? We've got to that level as a profession now. We're covering those people that have the inability to think.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's a really it's a good summary of where we are. I think from all those people on the trip, and that AI has come in disrupted. It just realised that we need to rethink what the future of the profession is going to look like. But it's not done enough to convince us there is a set path. All we seem to be at this point is that we know things are going to change. We don't know how they're going to change as yet, and we don't know how quickly it's going to happen. And so we can't really forge a path. We're all trying to learn from each other, bounce ideas around, and maybe try different things, different avenues, and see if that sticks. Obviously, I'm very opinionated on where I think the profession's going and where I think AI will take us. And I think it's an exciting time. I think it's going to be leading us away from what became, low value, just churned work, back into advisory, high value, deep conversations, deep relationships. But it will take a little while for us to get there, and it will disrupt a lot of, I guess, a lot of firms that are just not ready for that change because of the speed it's happening at.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think the only consensus that we probably had between the group was there is a general consensus that we still need to continue to bring in talent to the accounting industry from outside of the accounting industry, in terms of like not all of us being, analytical, kind of, slightly nerdy numbers people, and to bring some different perspectives and ideas to the sector, and maybe some of the levels of professions, whether it's around sales or marketing, etc. And I think also a lot of people still didn't have a huge amount of clarity as to where regulators really lie on a lot of this stuff. It's interesting because, having come from a mid-sized firm, where the regulators on the audit side were pushing technology and really like pushing firms to sort of embrace more and more technology, data analytics, AI, automation, a whole bunch of other things. On the broader compliance delivery, or even on the advisory delivery, regulators and professional membership bodies are relatively quiet on this, and apart from the occasional warning like we just talked about, they're not really setting the tone, I don't think, for where they think the industry is heading and what they think the potential impacts of this are. And maybe that's one of the challenges. Maybe that's why there is a little bit of confusion, a little bit of kind of like misstatement in terms of like where people, are thinking about this, because people are trying to build strategies for the next sort of 2 or 3 years and still not understanding. In fact, I talked to someone yesterday and they were talking about looking at technology for audit with a view that they probably wouldn't change it for 10 years. And I was like, 10 years, that for me is really old school thinking. I mean, I think the maximum lifespan for a product nowadays is probably 5 years max. And unless that vendor stays right at the forefront of the market, the likelihood is they'll be disrupted at some point in the future.
Completely agree. Well, lots to think about, take away, and digest, even just for myself. But that brings us to the end of another podcast. Thank you for listening. As you've probably seen, we are changing somewhat. Our branding is changing. We are rethinking and we're going to be delivering our podcast in a slightly different way going forward, as well as what we do as an entire brand under Digital Disruptors. So please stay tuned. More of this to come, and make sure you have secured or at least locked in the diary the date for the Digital Disruptor Awards next year, which is the evening before Accountex North. If you haven't done that, please make sure you've done it, because it was well attended last year and so many people said that they were frustrated they missed out. So we think it's going to be a sellout again going forward. So please do make sure you reach out, drop us a line, and we'll put you on the shortlist, even though we've not got an official one yet, just to make sure you get an email as soon as tickets become available. Otherwise, we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks again for listening.